big welcome back to our listeners of The Responsible Edge, the show brought to you by the Anti-Greenwash Charter. And this week, I'm delighted to be joined by Chloe and Matt. Chloe and Matt, thank you so much for giving up some of your time this Friday morning to join us on the show.
Cool. Thank you for having us.
And now, Matt, I'm going to start with you. And we've only got 10 minutes to sort of introduce you to our listeners. So I know we're not going to be able to do justice to all of the things that you've done in your career so far. But starting wherever you like, just give our listeners a flavour of you and your background, and perhaps just in particular, the role that kind of ethics, sustainability and responsibility in corporate behaviour has played in you doing what you've done so far.
Okay. So hi, everybody. I wanted to start, I suppose, when I was young. I'm from Barnsley, and when we were at home, we had a front room that was used for guests and on a Sunday to watch TV. It was the nicest room in the house, and I remember my mum saving up for like an oak or sofa, and the room was really beautifully decorated, and I loved how sort of special the room was. So I suppose that was my intro into interior design. Then my mum and my grandma used to go to an upholstery class, and they used to make various things and bring them home. And then that's how I got interested in how things went together. My grandma also made wedding dresses, and I was her mannequin a few times where she
cool.
would stand on a stool, and then she used to pin things. I remember Carmen Miranda outfit with like a bunch of fruit on my head. And then she taught me how to knit, how to crochet, how to sew. Awesome. So I've always had this thing of how things go together and how you make things. So I suppose the house proudness from that. And I lost my mum when I was 14 to cancer. So I've always had this thing in my head of like health and well-being and how to look after yourself. And I think that I've mentioned that story because that plays into what I'm doing now, which is a lot to do with health and well-being. I sit on the British Standards Committee for Fire Safety, and that sort of led into sustainability, as well as obviously David Attenborough. I think everybody in the world can know him as an influence. So I suppose went to college, then university, and then my degree was interior architecture, and my dissertation was on sustainability. So I spent sort of a good 8-9 months arguing with my tutor, who was convinced that sustainability wasn't a thing and I might be wasting my time, only now to realize he was doing it to give me a kick up the bum and encourage me. So at the time I was like, how can you not see this? This is what are you talking about? There's books written about this. Yeah. And then I suppose...
And sorry, Matt, let me just jump in there. What do you recall exactly what you wrote your dissertation on? Like, what was the title?
I've been trying to find a copy of it. I've even emailed the university, which is now closed. So I don't know how I'm going to get a copy of it. I just wanted to read my the conclusion.
Right.
I'm sure it was positive, and we've got to do this. We've got to move forwards. I do have a folder with all the clippings in of the newspaper coverage, where it's headlines of this and that and all the articles and things, but I don't actually have a copy of it, which is driving me mad. I'm still trying to find it.
Let me ask you on that. Was what you covered sort of fairly like pioneering within the interior space? Were there conclusions drawn from your dissertation that were kind of different to the sort of status quo and the rhetoric at the time?
Well, I remember reading lots of books about it and loads of articles, and my tutor at the time, he used to write for a magazine called Touchstone. And I remember reading articles in there, and Patrick is quite hippie-ish. And I think I started thinking it was quite a hippie-ish thing to do. And then we were looking at BedZ and that type of project and thinking that is quite hippie-ish. And how can you... And companies like Smile Plastics, we were seeing those, and it was like recycled toothbrushes made into a sheet material. But this was really when they first started. It used to still smell of mint. And it's like, it wouldn't really be a product that you could use on a project, but it's the fact that they were doing it and pushing it and talking about it. And it's nice now. It's taken a long time for the material side of it to get where I could show you a selection of materials and you wouldn't be able to tell which ones are sustainable and which ones are not. Because if for a long time you could really be like, that's the one. Everything looks a bit like a terrazzo. But now it's getting a bit more sophisticated and sort of integrating into the sort of material palette without standing out too much. So I suppose work-wise, I've lived in London since 2003. I graduated, went home, and I got a week's work experience and then lied to my dad and told him I'd got a full-time job. Then moved to London on a week's work experience. Was on the dole for a bit. Then I started getting paid, worked for a couple of years doing lots of creative work, an agency. Worked with Jamie Oliver, did his house, bit of work on 15. And then we did Kidderminster School, you know, when he was doing all of that, the food and how to get children to eat better. So that was nice, I suppose, being on the coalface of that, because I know that was a big movement at the time. So I've still got a couple of sketches that he did in Reading, and he was on the cover of the Evening Standard magazine, and that was taken next to the kitchen that I designed. So it was nearby. So that was really positive, and that was kind of moving in the sustainable way that I wanted to be sort of working it. And then when I joined an architecture practice, I did lots of, I suppose, detailing and learning how things went together. And that's when I realized that's what I really enjoyed. So like the technical side of it and sort of merging that with the creative material side of it.
And Matt, just for those of us that aren't aware of architectural design, etc., and how it works, just talk us through detailing, exactly what that refers to.
So I suppose it's having a quite analytical brain. So when you zoom out and you look at a plan of the whole building, then you can zoom in and you look at how maybe the skirting interface meets the architrave, and how does that detail work, or how does a cornice run into another cornice, or how do services come through a wall. If you've got raised access floors, how do partitions hit the floor, hit the slab? How does that come up through the slab? How does it fix into the ceiling? And then you've got issues of how do you apply certain finishes to certain surfaces, and how do you detail them in a way which is a sustainable approach, is how can you design it so that it will look as good as it can for as long as it can, and sort of design out details that might receive more wear and tear. So how can you put something in place of that so that you prolong how the building looks and how wear and tear is minimized? I worked on a project maybe 3 years ago it finished, a residential project on the South Bank, which is my favorite project I've ever done. And that was for Goddard Little Fair. And that was an amazing client who was very, very passionate about artwork and about materials. And he basically let us go wild. And it's a beautiful, beautiful project, and everything is just detailed beautifully. And it makes me super happy because it was just amazing. And I feel like that was the peak of being able to apply sort of my knowledge and understanding of materials to that project. I don't think I would love to do something similar again. And it took a very long time, but it does look amazing. And then I suppose now I set up my own business 2 years ago and doing high-end residential projects. And I was president of the British Institute of Interior Design for a year. And that helped, I suppose, me personally, because it's personal growth, development, public speaking. It also helps you think about the processes you go through in your business and how to apply them. It is only me and a couple of freelancers. So it's getting those things in place, building the library, working out what's important. But it's quite nice. It was quite nice having that platform. So you'd have to go to Decorex, for example, and speak on a panel about chemicals, fire retardants, health and well-being. So it really lets your brain process these things. And having conversations with Chloe through Interior Design Declares. So and Sustainable Design Collective is another group that I'm part of. So we meet every 2 months and have a couple of hours in a big round table and we just sort of chat through a couple of subjects. And it's involving yourself, things like that within the interior design community that really sort of galvanize your thoughts on things and really push agenda forwards.
And Matt, you're a brilliant podcasting guest already, because you perfectly segued me to my next question. So thank you for that.
Okay.
I'm fascinated by this. When you, by the way, it was a brilliant introduction to you and and the things that you've done. And thank you for nutshelling things so nicely for us. When you get to the end of your career and you look back on what you've done, what do you want to be able to say about what you did?
I think the health and well-being side of interior design and sustainability is what I'm most interested in. I think this probably goes back to the mum thing and her passing away of cancer, and it's not something that's in my brain all the time, but I think that's led to my interest in health and well-being. And if I can help people make better decisions and maintain their health and well-being, I think that would be a good thing. So I do talk to my nieces and nephews, and I'm like, this is what we need to do. But I try not to say too much, because then if you explain too many things, then it's depressing. And it seems like a massive thing and a very big subject to get your head around, which is why I quite like the coming in at the ground up and how you can affect health and well-being and how you can feel better by and be influenced by the environment that you're in. So like water quality, air quality, dermal contact with things, how you can try and make that environment healthier for occupants.
And just on that, and I'm going to ask you one more question, Matt, before we head over to you, Chloe. But in terms of, you mentioned that your business now, you work on exclusively residential projects. Do you do any commercial work?
I'm on residential at the moment. I've worked on lots of commercials. So throughout my career, I've worked, 3,000 person office, 1,500 person office. So I've done a lot of big commercial. I've done a lot of high-end residential lounges, multi-unit developments. And now I've sort of found myself in residential. I think that suits me, because that helps fund my time to do things like this. Because I think that's the balance you've got. And Chloe will probably agree with me on this. To do all of these things, we give our time for free. We give our time, because this is how we engage with other interior designers and promote sustainability. So I find I'm finding a balance between my sort of work and whatever this is, activism. I don't know. Someone said that to me, and I was like,
"Yeah, indeed."
But yeah, we talk about. So it's finding that sort of balance and doing things that you love. Trying to do that on both sides, on your work and your advocacy.
I love it, Matt. Brilliant introduction. Thank you so much for being so open and sharing your story with us. That was fantastic. Chloe, over to you. Similar thing. Take us back to wherever you would like to start. But yeah, give us, our listeners, a flavour of you and the things that you've done so far in your career.
So I guess I would describe myself as a furniture and product designer turned retail designer turned interior designer. But I was lucky that design has been the thread. For me, I literally grew up with the Body Shop. I was 6 when it opened in Brighton. I live a mile away from the first shop. So my family were customers. And so I kind of grew up with all the activism and the sort of ethical business side of this shop and Anita. And I kind of, as I grew into teenager, kind of, against animal testing, the ozone layer, there was lots of, half of one window poster would be about a product, one window poster would be about a campaign. So I literally kind of grew up learning about, Amnesty International and writing letters and just realizing you have some power as a consumer. So that kind of was happening while I had this love of design. So I kind of was very lucky. Like Matt, we sort of both went into design from school. This isn't a second career. This is the first one for both of us. So when I went to kind of look at the universities, I wanted to go to Nottingham Trent Polytechnic, they were still called Polytechnics then. So I'd looked at the interiors course, loved it. It was actually the building that my gran studied fashion in the 30s. Yeah, it's really special. So as I went to fill out the form, I put down furniture design because I have a real love of making things. So, I wasn't really a kid that played with toys very much. I played with tools and made things, so it's kind of like, I just wanted to, once I knew that there were these workshops there and you could learn about metalwork and, woodwork, upholstery, everything, I just really found that really exciting. So I went in that direction, but we worked alongside interiors. And it was a great grounding in design. So from there, I kind of graduated, and it was the early 90s. So it was the recession. It was really hard. Brighton then was very much tourism, finance, insurance. Nothing really creative happening here.
Wow.
And so I was very fortunate to get a junior designer role, designing furniture for a company along the coast. Redundancies happened. We were associated with the housing market. So when more sort of waves came along, I was made redundant. So in desperation, I felt really backed into a corner, but I just thought, I really want to contact Anita Roddick. So I literally wrote this handwritten letter to her and asking for experience. And I got a reply, and I was given work experience in the London office. And then that led to some freelancing. And then I was taken on and worked there as a full-time retail designer. So that was just a very huge learning experience in kind of ethical business. So designing retail.
Well, and Chloe, sorry to interrupt you, but equally, putting pen to paper, and what a fantastic thing to have done, to have bitten the bullet and said, no, I'm going to send this letter, and why not me? Why not be the person that Anita picks something up and thinks, well, good on you to be reaching out, and let's do something together. I think you miss 100% of the shots that you never fire, and that's brilliant to hear that.
Yeah.
Sorry.
It goes to sort of show how in a corner I felt, really, because I kind of really wanted to be in my hometown, and I deeply admired what she and her husband Gordon were doing. So I really learned about ethical design, ethical business, and sustainable design. So everything that we use for their store concepts. So there were store concepts that we all know, spaces. But there are also kiosks and sort of shop-in-shop experiences. There are lots so it's quite creative. And I worked alongside some really, really creative, talented people. And again, sort of doing the detailing and sort of the sort of it was lots and lots of experience of different areas. And every single piece of material we use had to be vetted. Mm-hmm. So in the same way that every ingredient for the products were vetted, we had to make sure that we weren't using anything that was off-gassing. So there'd be formaldehyde. We avoided formaldehyde, PVC. Timber had to be sustainable. It's non-negotiable. We were aware of the animal testing of some of the sort of finishes that we might be using. So we were avoiding those. So it's the toxicity of our materials was really analysed. And just noting that this is the mid-90s. So these are things that I'd love to be happening routinely now in our industry. And they are sort of happening, but they were very at the forefront of this. So I worked there for 10 years, worked in the Australian office for the best part of a year, which was wonderful. And then it was such an empowering business. They kind of encouraged you to go and do your own thing. They wanted you to sort of fulfill your potential. So I felt that I'd kind of done quite a few store concepts and rollouts, so time to sort of give it a try on my own. And that was 20 years ago. So I've nearly been in business for 20 years now as Materialise Interiors. And I've just carried on doing things the way I learned. but also kind of applying that to my clients who have largely been small businesses, sort of commercial, and then homeowners. So kind of working very closely. I like to feel that I work collaboratively with my clients rather than sort of delivering them a finished design. And yeah, for a long time, quietly doing all the body shop stuff in the background. But in the last sort of 10 years or so, I've been getting louder about saying what I'm doing and attracting like-minded clients. So a couple of years ago, I was approached to write a book for Reba, Sustainable Interior Design. And as part of that process, one of my chapters is about ethical business. So I wanted to go through the B Corp process. I felt that I'd been doing it anyway, but I wanted to be measured against. I wanted to be transparent and also to go through the process so I could write about it. So I've been a B Corp nearly 2 years. And just continuing my education all the way through. I've loved learning more and more. So most recently, kind of about regenerative design, which is kind of where we need to be heading as an industry.
And Chloe, you beautifully described that, and I think it's so fascinating to hear about your time at the as you were talking about the work that was being done at the body shop, and then as you say, referencing the fact that we were in the 90s when all this stuff was happening. It's super pioneering, isn't it? I just feel like it was so modern what you were describing, and amazing to see them as the trailblazers and for you to be influenced like that. I want to ask you a question though. I think you alluded to it before, Matt, but how did you two kind of connect, and where did the sort of, the beginnings of Chloe and Matt sort of originate from?
I would say through the British Institute of Interior Design. I was a director for 7 years and I stepped down last year. So I would imagine, was it maybe towards the beginning of that, Chloe? Would have been then.
I remember sitting next to you when you were going to go on to council at the AGM. So I've known you for a good while. And it's been a really supportive professional body to be a part of, because I'm a sole practitioner. It's lovely to kind of, we're often put against each other as competitors, but we're not. Our industry is supporting each other, and the BIID is really a great place for that. So, and I've been on the sustainability committee for 5 years at the BIID, which just come to the end of the term, and Matt's now the chair of the committee, which is great. So lots of crossovers. And we also, one of the founders of Interior Design Declares, which is the declaration for our industry that there is a climate and biodiversity crisis, and let's kind of work together and share knowledge to work against that. And Matt has been very involved in our steering committee. So lots of crossovers. Yeah. It's been great.
Yeah. And I think we both, I suppose, involved a lot in the industry. And we talk and we meet lots of people who are like-minded. And I think what we've got to try and do is pass that knowledge on to clients and to the students learning, and I suppose the wider population, so they understand why we're doing what we're doing. And then they can start asking for these things. Because as much as there's change from the top down, we need to sort of be the change at the bottom, working our way up. But even things like, I don't know, I've changed like all my products I use for the bathroom, all the cleaning things in the house. I recycle everything. Like there's certain things you can do, and that's the start of it, getting everybody involved in thinking about those things. And then you can move it up to clothing, for example. So you just have natural fibers in your clothing. You just got a filter on the washing machine. So if any fibers that are not natural get caught, and then you can recycle that. So the sort of incremental changes you can make, and you can talk about that are easily achievable. And then,
Which, Matt, again, you're as I say, you're a dream podcast guest because you're segueing us onto the article. But before we dive into the article and I ask you to give a summary of that, Chloe, I want to ask you one more question. And I think this is particularly interesting because of your formative experience with the Body Shop. But what would be your report card for the interiors industry when it comes to adopting sustainability principles and progress that has been made during your career? What would be your overall analysis of how things are going?
So I think I have huge admiration for other designers. I think that they are great at adopting new things. They're very adaptable. We wear a lot of hats. There's got to be some psychology, some finance, some design, a little bit of design. There's a lot of running a business. A lot of us are sole practitioners. I think the BIID found that half of their members were sole practitioners, and then maybe another 20% were less than 5. So there's a lot of just surviving and running as a business, marketing. But I think sustainability is another layer that our industry very easily can adopt. And I can see there's a lot of progress. I think we're in a less bad kind of place rather than a, better kind of regenerative, flourishing kind of way of designing. But I think it won't take too long. And I think sometimes we are very like the architects, and then other times I think we are very different, because a lot of us are working directly for a client. There is less regulation in place to support us to push our clients to have better. So we have to sort of do quite a sell into clients, or do it in stealth mode, which is what I've been doing for a long, long time. and stealth mode's great, but if you have that engaged client who really wants it all, you can push it so much further. So I think that the industry is receptive and capable, and we've helped to create some resources for them. So the BIID, our committee, has put together a guide, which is a really helpful guide to work in a sustainable way. It's freely available to everyone. And then at Interior Design Declares, it's actually my it kind of comes from my Body Shop kind of crib sheet of how to work, which then came out into like my supplier questionnaire for my for B Corp. You have to send in lots of things that you're using and various strategies, and so Interior Design Declares, we've kind of taken that a lot further on, and we've developed that into a supplier screening questionnaire, which can be adapted to suit anyone. And actually it's for our industry, but it could be used by anyone. So there's some really good resources out there for us to then push on our supply chain, because I think we have so much influence kind of up and downstream from us. So downstream to our clients, and protecting installers and kind of sharing learnings in that direction, but also upstream, encouraging our suppliers to do better, and to it's good business sense to respond to our inquiries. For a long time I was asking for sustainable timber furniture and asking for certifications, but so many of our furniture suppliers just don't know where that timber's from, and I find that mind-blowing, because that's so harmful to biodiversity loss. People aren't getting paid fairly or working in safe working conditions. So we have so much influence. I think we really need to use it. And I'm sitting here as a sole practitioner. I've always been a sole practitioner. I would pull people in should I need them, but I feel I've had some influence, and so I want other people to feel empowered to know that they can do that too.
Hear, Chloe. That was brilliant. That's a call to arms, a call to action for other interior designers out there. Guys, as expected, we've absolutely obliterated our timings there on talking about you two. But we can talk about you two all day, so I'm not totally surprised by that. We're going to move on now, though, if it's okay. Matt, would you mind providing our listeners with a bit of a summary overview of the Forbes article? I think it was August last year. Would you mind just providing a bit of a summary of it, and then picking out perhaps whatever the most kind of interesting points were from the piece for you?
Yeah. Okay. So the article was 20 strategies for balancing business sustainability with profitability. And I think Chloe's touched on quite a few bits of in a previous description, as sort of describing what sustainability is to clients, bringing them on a journey with you. So it's sort of an educational piece about why it should be important to them. and give it sort of a human aspect to what you're proposing, and then start small, because I think people are worried that they're not doing anything. So starting with small incremental changes and slowly building up. If you look at a big goal and you go, I'm never going to do that, then people won't do it. So it's sort of like a phased approach, and work towards it. Sorry, it just went off in the room.
that was very striking. But completely changed your
my screen brightness now. I'll try and
oh dear.
There you go. Sorry.
No.
And then I think like explaining to them the sort of different approaches and what sustainability actually means. So Clary's mentioned sort of regenerative design, but looking at circular design and how to specify in a way that allows your decisions to then take their place in the circular economy. On my projects, I have a O&M manual, and in that I explain from the beginning of the project to a client and say, right, this is what the O&M manual will do. It will detail everything, detail all of the suppliers. It will have information about how to look after what you've bought. But then it also, when you come to end of its life, this is who you might be able to contact to sort of get rid of the piece if you don't want it anymore. You can contact them. They might take it back. I'm hoping in 25 years, when things I'm specifying now maybe are not wanted anymore, that will be in place, and there will be, I suppose, like if you've got Harrods now, you'll have Harrods Part 2 or Harrods Revise, and it will be second-hand furniture. And you will always have clients that want brand new and won't want second-hand. But this is good because this is putting items in at the top, and then as they become second-hand, then they'll sort of feed their way down. But hopefully things will be seen as having more value. And by putting the O&M manual together, you give provenance to those pieces as well. So if they've been invested in, which is the buy better, buy less. If we're saying, right, if you spend £15,000 on this, in 5 years' time, you might be able to sell it for 7 if you look after it. Here's how to look after it. So it's just changing their approach and how they see things and how they maintain what they have. And
Matt,
yeah.
how do your owner's manual and the clients that you work with, again, my totally ill-informed view would suggest, and you even alluded to it there, in terms of some clients just wanting to have the brand new, if you like. Is there ever, you're obviously working on like luxury residential property, like how is that association between luxury and sustainable material and sustainable design? Is sustainability now part of luxury, or is it a really difficult job to try and convince people to say no, secondhand or refurbed or whatever is as sexy as the brand new that you could have?
I think there's a lot of work being done to try and recognize it as, but I'm not sure how much value I would give to it. I think I'd need to really start looking into some of the, I suppose there's awards and there's companies are setting up practices or talking about it, but I suppose you've got to try and avoid greenwashing and avoid adding eco onto the front of everything and assuming that makes it an ecological project or a product, or a decision that was driven by a sustainable decision. But I think if you say I sustainably sourced something, then you're wrong, because that's not really what you're doing. It's much deeper and much more complex, and there's much more to making sustainable choices than just sustainably selecting something. So yeah,
I kind of, sorry to come in, but I find that was kind of a frustration I was having, because there's so many definitions and kind of routes into sustainability. I avoid animal products, so I hear a lot of people talking about natural, that actually some animal products aren't so natural. Some animal products need things to keep them preserved so they don't deteriorate, because naturally they would regenerate, so there's kind of different motivations and people's definitions are very different. So that was kind of the structure of my book, really, was to kind of split out 11 possible approaches that you could use to draw yourself or your client or your project team into sustainability, to kind of focus on one thing, because you can't do all of it, and some people don't have the passion for all of it. So I found that quite interesting to follow each of those approaches and sort of bring out all the examples to sort of show how beautifully it can be done.
And Chloe, just give us a flavour of those approaches. Like, what are the sorts of things that you would propose? You know, presumably we're talking here about how interior designers can go about influencing their clients to make or to endorse more sustainable choices. Is that a fair synopsis? And give us a flavour as to what those sorts of approaches are.
It literally spans from sort of various headings that would come under the circular economy, but I've sort of split them out to highlight them even more. So reuse, you know, do we even need to start from scratch with everything? And each of these examples has like a space, a product and a building to sort of demonstrate. Then there's a pure circular economy examples, and then sharing economy, which I loved because it's kind of, we're fixated on this ownership. Not only are we fixated on new, we're fixated on owning the things. And we know that fast furniture is an issue in our industry, just like it is in fashion. People aren't having that emotional durability, the emotional connection to something to keep it for a long time. So maybe if somebody is following a trend, maybe they should just hire it, rent it for that time using the sharing economy, and then let it go back. And so there's a great example, ZZ Driggs, who are in Brooklyn, who they're a combination of beautiful kind of pre-loved high quality items, and also kind of fairly locally made crafts people, furniture, lighting, all sorts of things. So that was a nice, I just want people to sort of, a lot of this is sort of thinking differently about how we work. And then I go through like regenerative design, vegan design. We've got the climate and biodiversity crisis. Could that be your motivation? You know, do you want to kind of have that as the focus, or as ethical business the focus? So there's 11 in total, and I've sort of spoken to other sustainability professionals, and they kind of said this is helpful to them, just, you know, to apply to their part of their industry. So yeah, I think we need that, because otherwise sustainability is just translated in different ways and confusing. So just kind of focus on some things. There are so many overlaps between them all. I mean, by biophilic design and healthy building, they have very many crossovers, but they also have very many differences. So it's focus on one, pick up some others as you go, but just sort of start somewhere and find one. I mean, for a designer to use that to connect to their client is, you know, you are then given license then to go and find more suitable things than just a sort of generic sort of library. So.
And Chloe, you, and Matt obviously alluded to within the article, I think it's talked about sort of taking sort of stages and steps in order to embed and integrate sustainability into your own small business. And then what you're describing is how that then applies to the way that you engage with your clients as well, and thinking about taking your clients along this sort of journey, if you like, of exploration and understanding of how to make sustainable choices. I'm going to ask you an elephant in the room question for people working in interior design. Again, might be getting the business model totally wrong here, so feel free to shoot me down. But if the model, in terms of clients becoming aware of and adopting sustainability kind of principles in the way that they view their interior spaces, how profitable is that approach for you as an interior designer versus them taking a more traditional approach to out with the old, in with the new, constantly changing and evolving and spending on their development of their interiors? How does that sit?
I find it has variable. It sits in various ways. Sometimes, I mean, I've fitted out Brighton Dome and Brighton Festival offices here in Brighton. They took over a single floor of a new building, beautiful. So treated the whole thing with sort of like not using materials unnecessarily, using pre-loved, high quality office furniture from a supplier that refurbishes. So they've got much higher quality, cheaper price. You can do it. You just need to have a client that works along with you and kind of share. It's encouraging that. When it's harder if you're just trying to do sort of sneaky swaps in the background. Then I find that quite difficult to sort of, the bottom line is often different. So it's kind of better the honesty and the collaboration helps it to work really well. Don't know about you, Matt.
And Chloe, just before we come to Matt, just one question on that. In your experience, are clients prepared to pay more for a sustainable outcome?
So a commercial client who values genuinely sort of ties in with the storytelling side of it. It fits their own purpose. And there's an opportunity there to kind of use in marketing and kind of amplify that story. Yeah, they see any value, any storytelling elements that I can put in. They absolutely love it. And I think that's great. I can see that could be used for greenwashing if you're not careful at times as well. So it's sort of like a fine line. And then homeowner clients, they love to tell their friends stories of things. They don't want to say, when their friends come around, oh, where's that? That's lovely. And they kind of have no story to tell. So they always want the story too. So I think if the story is strong, and it's not wildly different, I think it's generally really received well.
Okay, fascinating storytelling again. It's such a common theme on the Responsible Age. We talk to so many people about like the impact and the importance and the value that we all place on the stories that we can tell, which is you perfectly alluded to there, Chloe. Matt, what's your comment on that side of things?
And I suppose profitability wise, if you were specifying, let's say, 10 dining chairs and there were £1,200 each, let's say £1,000 each, just for easy maths. So you could find them from a supplier and specify them and purchase them. And if you've agreed with your client that you'll put 20% on the top, or you could find some existing chairs that they like. You could have them reupholstered with natural fillings and install them for the same price. It would probably take more of your time to source the chair, source the fabric, go to the upholsterers, see the process. But I think you could probably get something that is on par. So in terms of the investment from the client, it would probably be the same for an upholstered, pre-loved, revised piece of furniture. I'm trying to push that. But I think it would be a similar price. But it would be more, it would take more of your fees out of that percentage, but the outcome would be the same. You would still get the same number of chairs in a fabric, but you would have a story. You also would have, you could have natural fillings to any upholstered part to the chair. So you can be more specific and you can slide that story in. Whereas if you bought them, depends where you get them from, whether you could get them with natural fillings. So I think that's kind of important. And then the natural fillings is trying to remove chemicals from the furniture so that if it gets damaged or end of life, it can be recycled if it's natural materials. If it has chemical fire retardants, then it means that it can't be processed. So currently most of the furniture in the country has POPs in there, so petrol organic pollutants. So most upholstered furniture in the country needs to be incinerated at end of life. So that's not very good for anybody. So it would be lovely if people really embraced reupholstery, taking existing items and reupholstering them in natural fibers and natural fabrics and sort of removing that problem before it becomes an end of life problem. And it also gives you a piece of furniture that might have been in your family for years, might be quite traddy looking, but you could reupholster it in something really contemporary or something really interesting or neutral, and then throw some cushions on to sort of bring it into a trend. But I think it's looking at how we can change the future, but also changing what is here now and how we can deal with what we have that surrounds us. Because it will eventually, in 50, it's long-term thinking, it's like 50 years, 100 years' time, will this chair that I'm sat on still be in use? What happens to it? Where does it go?
And I suppose, Matt, and you've described that perfectly, like ultimately, when I'm an interior designer, which I know my partner will be rolling around with laughter thinking about you claiming that, but if I was, and I was making decisions right now, ultimately, the value add to me right now in the short term of encouraging my client to go and make a sustainable choice about X, Y, or Z is that it provides me with a story that I can tell about the work that I'm doing with that client. That is really the value add to me. And therefore, yes, it takes me more time, but if I can package that story up, it can help me improve the recognition of the work that I do as an interior designer. And from a brand perspective and a personal brand perspective, it's obviously the value add that I can redeem. Because I think you're absolutely spot on, Matt. I think it would be so lovely if we all had this kind of long-term mindset in mind. But I think in the world that we live in at the moment, especially here in the UK, with things as difficult as they are, you can forgive people for thinking, well, I need to understand what's in it for me now. And that is presumably what's in it for me.
That sort of weaves in the social aspect of it. So there are upholsterers across the country. And if you can take a piece of furniture you have and reupholster it, rather than buying something new, then you're supporting local businesses. And you're also helping remove those chemical fire retardants in furniture so they can be incinerated in smaller quantities, and you don't basically throw the whole chair in, you can strip it back. And I think this ties in with the, I suppose, buy less, buy better. It's investing in a piece, and it's that emotional connection and that story, and that's what people don't have with the fast fashion. With fast furniture, you don't buy it with the intention that you're going to keep it for a long time and your grandchildren might have it. You buy it because you need something there now, and it's trying to change how you think about things. And I'm kind of really interested in I suppose the very mass-produced side of it, because there's so much opportunity for growth. If you think about all the furniture that's ever been designed, how much of it would actually be dismantleable, repairable, reupholsterable? There's like a design opportunity for the design world to reinvent and redesign these amazing pieces of furniture that already exist, and all the brands to create new versions of these pieces that couldn't previously have been part of the circular economy, but now can be. I think it's a super interesting time, and if you're a brand that makes furniture, it would be, incredibly exciting.
And Matt, let me ask you one more question on this before we move on to the magic wands. You both are going to have a magic wand hit in a moment, but what would be I asked Chloe about kind of a review and a report card for the interiors industry over the course of the last sort of 20, 30 years. Matt, when you look forward and you think about the interiors industry, like, how hopeful are you, and what gives you hope that the interiors industry is going to continue to grow and develop in the right direction when it comes to the kind of choices that you've described?
That's a lot. I think if we can get away from the sort of consumerism side and buying new, like Chloe was saying, everything has to be new, everything has to be shiny, we want everything now, and people think about long term. But in 30 years' time, if we started upholstering all the furniture now, by that point, we'd be in a very different place. And I think, like sharing economy and renting things, if you've got something that someone else can use, then you can either give it to them, or they can loan it, or you can rent it. Ownership of things especially if you're living in like a flat in London, there's so many flats, people are moving around a lot. And I would imagine a lot of furniture is bought just for a year and then it's gotten rid of. But I don't think if high streets were changed and we had secondhand, and I think this concept of secondhand was elevated more. I think charity shop, and you think down like here, and then you think antique, and you think up here. We need like a mid ground of this is furniture that's being used by somebody. It's here, and we have to start valuing existing pieces. And I think that's hard when it's fast furniture, to actually give something value, because people can buy a new version of it for half the price.
But Matt, that's absolutely fascinating. I love that analogy of the charity shop and the antique shop. And you're so right. It's, where's the next line drawn, if you like, between the two? It's a fascinating concept.
I suppose when you specify things for clients, if I specify £5,000 armchair, and then they might want to change their lounge in 5 years, and I give them all that information in their O&M manual, then they could contact the brand, or there should be somewhere where you can say, I don't want this anymore. Can you present it to the public and someone can buy it? But it has to be more in person. But then it becomes a local thing, because the cost of transporting pieces of furniture around the country, even the same with upholsterers. That's why it's local upholsterers doing local work is perfect. If I send a chair from London to Scotland to get reupholstered to bring it back, it isn't worth it, because the cost of a person driving, the cost of the petrol, it just doesn't balance. And that's the balance that we need to readdress and we need to find. So hopefully we'll be somewhere close to figuring that out.
Well, we've got some time to do it. And I have to say, with the likes of you two spearheading some of the initiatives going on within the industry, I certainly am more confident than I was at the beginning of the conversation, to put it that way. So, guys, let me finish now. I want to, Chloe, start with you if possible. This ever used, perhaps I think it's certainly a second-hand, perhaps reused magic wand that we've got utilized on the responsible edge. We're practicing what we preach here. If I was to hand that over to you, Chloe, and you could change one thing about the commercial world this instant, what would that one thing be?
I think originally I wanted to say about having legislation to support what we all are trying to do, so that we're not having to do all the education piece and that, but I think if I'm really tuning into myself deeply, I just want corporate to care. I want them to be motivated themselves to want what we're here to support them to deliver. Everything seems to be pinning on other people. I'm unhappy with how the world is going. I've researched and I've kind of found out too much actually in places in the book, how 2050 will look, and the problems that we will have that we are thinking we're experiencing now. I just want people to have that motivation within them that want to change, and not to wait for it to be solved by someone else.
A brilliant magic wand suggestion, Chloe. Everybody take personal responsibility through a collective appreciation of the state of play. I think that's a fantastic use of the magic wand. Matt, over to you. Magic wand time. What would you change?
I think education of people, and commercial world can educate their staff within their companies. And I think initiatives like the recycling plastic bottles and people actually getting paid for the effort that they put in, I think that is a really interesting proposal, because I think once people start seeing the value in something, like I was saying, you've got to see the value in existing furniture. If you start with plastic bottles or glass bottles, this used to happen when I was a little boy in 1983. I used to go to the shop and take my glass bottle, get 10 pence back or 2 pence off the next bottle, and that disappeared. And I think something like that fundamentally would help people understand the value of what they have and the value of what they're buying, that they can get something back. And I think if people don't have that carrot and they don't have the incentive to to do better, then they might not. But I think if you can give them something, and it's ground up. People are asking for certain things to be certain ways. If they're asking for sustainable finishes, and we'll be in a better place. But
I love it. No, I love it. Let's get 10p's handed back for bottles being handed in. I know it's an analogy, sort of a drawing an example, but I think it's a great one. I think much more thinking about the facilitation of sustainable decision making. I think across every part of our society would be worth it. I'm always reminded of again, he's actually been referenced twice in two shows. I would love to get him on if I ever could, but Rory Sutherland, the creative director of The Gate, not The Gate. Where is he? Ogilvy. That's it. Yeah. Obviously, I think he did a YouTube TED talk a while ago called "Sweating the Small Stuff." I don't know if you guys saw that, and it was absolutely brilliant. And he just spoke about wanting to see businesses appoint a chief detail officer, and their role would be to look at like all the minutiae of stakeholder experience and come up with ways of improving it. And I think that applied thinking about, the wider population, the way that we all engage with services and products and, brands, etc., I think would be an amazing step forward. But I think Matt, come in.
Sorry, I was going to say, I watched a film last week called Plastic People, and it's a documentary about microplastics and nanoplastics. And I don't know if it will get general release. This was at like the documentary cinema in Bloomsbury. But you've got films like that, and then there's one about fire retardants. But I think especially the Plastic People could do with actually watching that. It's not misinformation, it's technical, scientific research, and it's showing that like every person on the planet will have plastics, nanoplastics, microplastics in their body. And then if you're already unhealthy and you've got sort of like fatty bits in your that's clogging your arteries, the plastic will stick to the fatty bits and it will build up, and it can cause like heart attacks. There's so many detrimental health effects, like sperm count in men, which is supposed to drop to like almost nothing by 2050, which is a massive issue, but no one seems to talk about it. And I think that's part of like the misinformation and greenwashing, and who do you trust and how much can you trust what they're saying? Because if that film is amazing, but if everybody watched it, maybe that would be a turning point, and then people would change what they're doing. But it's going to take marketing, and I don't think the film will get general release. I hope it does, but it's very scary.
Well, it's just touching everything, and it right through to your buying decision can have a biodiversity impact, and I find that mind blowing because we completely depend on biodiversity for our health. And if people can't see that connection, it's providing everything for us, and the materials that we use and the food that we eat. So we really need to preciously protect. And it affects so many industries.
Chloe, I couldn't agree more. I think the term that people use when they refer to, what are you doing to save the planet? Don't worry about the planet. Worry about humanity. If you worry about the fact the planet will be absolutely fine, but if we ruin our garden, then we're going to kill ourselves. And that's the headline. It was fascinating. We had a conversation recently with somebody talking about language and talking about, imagine what impact or change it would be that if when everybody started to talk about saving the planet, we'd actually started talking about saving humanity. How different would our current set of circumstances actually be? Guys, that was absolutely brilliant. I know we could carry on talk for hours, but I'm going to conclude it there. Thank you so much for both coming on the show this morning. It's been a whistle-stop tour, but it's been very, very interesting, and I'm sure our listeners have enjoyed it. But thank you both for coming on.
Thank you for having us.
Charlie.
And that's it for today's episode of The Responsible Edge. A big thank you to our guests, Chloe Bullock, founder of Materialize Interiors and a leading advocate for vegan, circular and low impact design, and Matthew Freeman, former president of the British Institute of Interior Design and founder of Freeman Studio. specializing in sustainable and regenerative interiors. Today, we explored insights from the article 20 Strategies for Balancing Business Sustainability with Profitability, discussing how interior designers can embrace sustainability without compromising financial viability and their impact on the clients they work with. As a reminder, this episode was brought to you by the Anti-Greenwash Charter, championing responsible sustainability communications. Visit antigreenwashcharter.com to learn more. I'm Charlie Martin. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to subscribe, share, and leave us a review. See you next time.